Hi friends and family, and welcome back this week to my YouTube. Y a pas photo. This week we're talking about the American dream. Fascinating topic, and I have three guests around the country, around the globe, who are going to share their unique stories, experiences. I have Camille and Michael, who are both in Chicago, and I have Pascal in Montreal. I will let them each introduce themselves. Bonjour Camille.
Bonjour, thanks for having me today. So I'm Camille and I am from Annecy, which is a beautiful city in the Alps in France. It's right next to Switzerland. I've been living in Chicago since 2016 and today I am a freelance French teacher.
Really nice. Camille, you're also married to an American.
Yes.
This is what brought you to the US too.
Absolutely, yes. My husband.
And we'll talk about your family because your two brothers also live in the US.
Yeah.
Pascal is in Montreal. Bonjour Pascal.
Bonjour Didi, merci de nous avoir ici. I'm Pascal, I'm from north of France, I'm from Lille, and I used to live in Chicago between 2011 to 2015, and now I live in Montreal, and I work in innovation and Fintech. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Pascal. Bonjour, Michael.
Bonjour. Thank you for having me as well. And bonjour, Camille and Pascal. I am an American, Michael, 35. I live in Chicago, but I have a background also in Washington, D.C. as well. I lived in France for a good part of my life, most recently 2007 to 2012 in Grenoble, Lyon, and Paris. I also lived in Angers. So very involved with the French community here in the U.S. and also sometimes advise expats going to France. So happy to be here.
And I wanted Michael to be part of the conversation because Michael, you're probably the most French of all Americans here in Chicago. So we will benefit from your double perspective. First big question, friends. What is the American dream and what does the American dream mean to you? Is that still a reality that you think is achievable for all of us, or is that a distant fantasy? So Camille, love brought you here to Chicago. Tell us about your story, about your experience.
Yes, so for the American dream, I have like two ideas. So growing up and going to school and you learn about America, American dream is most often like described as a land of opportunity where you can have a great job and just opportunities in like science and technology and research. That's the ideas that I grew up with. But me, personally, my American dream was more about experiencing the country, like how diverse it is. Because it's a huge country. And from coast to coast, you can see a lot of different things. And for me, because I love to travel, my American dream is I want to explore everything. I want to meet different people because a lot of Americans actually have immigrants families from Europe, and so for me I love that connection, and the nature is just so amazing here. So that's my dream. That's my American
also
dream.
It's a dream that is a family dream for you, Camille, because both of your brothers also live in the US. Tell us about that.
Yes, they do, but you know, it was actually very random. It was never really decided by the three of us that we would live in the US. We've all wanted to come and travel to experience the country, and I think we've all had a great time. And so it's really random that it happened. But so my older brother, he's been in the States a lot because of his passion, which are movies. He writes like scenarios and he's producing. So for him, his American dream was more like California side for like Hollywood and just being able to make it, because in France, like the film industry, you can still make it, but it's very hard. So for him, that was his main motivation. Then for my other brother, he actually came to the States thanks to his wife, who's French, and she's a teacher, and she now works at an international lycée. So they both had a desire of doing expatriation or immigration for work. and they just loved it here so much that they decided to just stay. And for me, I fell in love with the States first, and then I happened to meet my husband. So then I moved here.
So the love of the country and the love of an American brought you here, Camille. Pascal, what is your experience about the American dream? What brought you to Chicago and then to Montreal?
And it's very interesting. What brought me to Chicago, in fact, it's not me that choose, but it's my company who offered me the opportunity to go to US, and I took this opportunity because at this time I wanted to improve my English. And I think it was a good opportunity because I wanted to experience what it means to be to live in US and what is the American dream. And what was interesting for me when I used to live in US, now I live in Canada, and I can compare both countries. It's a land of opportunity. It's true that it's a land of opportunity. And what impressed me a lot is how people are not scared to create a project, create a business, and all the entrepreneurship aspect. And for what I could see when I moved in 2011, it wasn't so developed in Europe. There were a lot of entrepreneurs in Europe, but they don't have this kind of spirit. No, it changed a little bit recently. All around Europe, especially in some tech sector in France, Germany, and other tech sector in Europe. And I think this thing didn't change in US. The only thing that I think it's sad, US was created with immigrants, and a lot of tech companies in California and all around US were founded by immigrants or parent, child of immigrant. And now I think it changed a lot recently, unfortunately. And I think it's in benefit of other countries like Canada. Canada now it's have a very open immigration policy that US used to have, and US now it's a little bit more restricted and it's a little bit more difficult to immigrate. I think it's still possible, but it's a little bit different. And but it's very interesting, you know, either Canada or either US. I think it's a land of opportunity and a land where you may study in one field back in your country, and in US or Canada you can do something else. And this thing it's possible in North America, and in Europe it's possible, but it's more difficult to do it.
And especially Pascal, because you are in the field of tech and startup and entrepreneurship. So you see it every day through your professional lens that this is really opening up, and people from overseas keep coming to North America, whether it's Canada and whether it's the US, because it's still a land of opportunity for job.
Yes,
for creating.
There is a lot of opportunity for job, and there is people take risk here. Meaning people, investors take risk. There is a lot of money that are floating in Silicon Valley in US, etc. And the company, the same company in Europe will raise at 2, 3, up to 10 times less than what they will be able to raise in US. And this thing make a big difference. People here and investors here are not so scared to invest money, especially in tech.
You're right. So we're talking here about the mindset. The mindset in North America is really high risk taker, more adventurous, have a high risk level degree. Michael, I'm interested in your double perspective as an American who has lived in France. Of course, the American dream is your native land, but do you understand why the country keeps, why the country is so appealing to foreigners, even during that time, a challenging time under our leadership right now? And Pascal has mentioned the immigration is now more limited under new leadership, but what is your take on why America still continue to appeal?
Yeah, so thanks. Building on that reputation, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Building on that idea of risk and venture capital. Sorry, I have background audio. Is that okay?
Yeah. Go.
Okay. I think if we go to the concept of entrepreneurship, a good kind of summary of difference between France and the US is that, you know, venture capital in French is capital risque. So there's a much more emphasis on the risks you're taking to actually launch an initiative and an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, whereas in the U.S. it's kind of looked at as like an actual opportunity. Obviously, the entrepreneur itself is a French word, and there's a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in France. And Station H, I think it's called, is an entrepreneur and startup incubator in Paris. It's really taken off. But I think in the U.S., the appeal for years has really been kind of lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the image, and being able to come here no matter what your background is and start something and create your own opportunity for yourself. It's not perfect. There's definitely problems along the way, but over generations and since our founding, this idea that you can do what you set out to do, that's firmly anchored in our country and a national identity. And I think that harks back to our founding, where, you know, my own ancestors from Italy and Ireland came over here in the 19th century, and they didn't go back to Europe. They started a new life here, and wanted to make it and improve their lives, improve their lot in life, and grow their families here. And they have. My grandmother was the first to go to college, but her siblings didn't go to college, and then her kids, one of whom is my dad, all went to college and really did well in their careers. And it all started out, you know, from her father coming over on a ship from Italy. So I think that my own experience with my ancestors here and my experience seeing it from my time living in France as an expat myself, I see the attraction of both countries. And I can tell you that I've jumped through a lot of administrative hoops to get through my paperwork in France, or whether it's a student visa, intern visa, teaching visa, or work visa. I also had a French girlfriend that was very serious. So I was looking at marriage in France, and you know, I was able to get a lot of experience at different levels. So but as an American, I know that our system is very difficult for immigrants, especially right now. I do see a lot of encouragement of foreign students coming here to continue their studies. And I do see, you know, a continuation of excitement to come and either study abroad or work here, because I think a lot of it also culture influence. You know, I have a lot of French friends who grew up watching like Friends or even Seinfeld or The Office or Curb Your Enthusiasm. And they just
learn English, Michael.
Yeah, exactly. And so I actually had, when I taught English in France, a lot of the students who spoke with less of an accent watched the DVDs, American DVDs, without French, you know, overdub. And so I think overall, there's still an interest in the U.S. because of the culture, because of this sort of aura that it has, and with the very real reality that you can create a business here pretty easily and meet people from all different kinds of backgrounds. So it still is a melting pot despite its issues. And I definitely would be willing to answer more questions about what I think the experience is for foreigners coming here.
Well, I'm learning new stuff because, Michael, I didn't know that you had Italian roots. I thought you were 100% Irish.
Mostly Irish, but
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you had Italian heritage. Okay, so we talk a lot about all the positive of what makes the American dream, obviously open-mindedness, high risk level, great job opportunities, melting pot, creativity, flexibility. People are very adaptable and mobile. You know, Americans move around the country. Let's talk about the downsides. Obviously, what are the challenges? We all had challenges. Michael, you talked about your challenges of immigration in France, having to go through the different administrative hoops. And I'm a product of that, because when I came to the US, I went through different visas, student visa, work visa, until I got my green card. So I can also relate. I think we all did at some point. So let's talk about the challenges. Camille, what kind of challenges did you experience? I mean, the American dream is not just fantasy and la la land. one is the harsh reality.
Yes, so I think like the three of us, Gigi and Pascal, we've experienced going through immigration.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a challenge, but totally possible, you know. But it's a long process and it can be heavy, especially financially if you're not prepared. Yeah, you have to figure it out sooner than later. Um, Otherwise, I guess other challenges. It's just, I guess, understanding how the country works. Like, be prepared that health insurance is going to be a problem. You know, get your finances like straight. Make sure you know how to be able to live on your own. Because even though it's true in the States, you can make a lot of money compared to France, but still, they're like, yeah, the property taxes, it's insane here. And yeah, being ready for health insurance. And even though gas is pretty cheap compared to France, it can be expensive to just travel nationally, as opposed to Europe, where you can just get an easy jet ticket for 50 euros and you can go like to a different country. So yeah, I guess for me, my main challenges were getting my finances right and planning ahead. I feel like here you have to plan for everything, cost wise, your house, your health, or yeah, I don't know, other costs that you just don't think about because you don't have those problems in France. You know, you come here like, oh, okay, I have to save a little bit more. Yes,
Almost a give and take, because you do make more money here, but everything has a cost. Healthcare, but also education. Education is also very expensive in the US. Pascal, when you lived in the US, what were for you the main challenges, personally, professionally?
I think one of the main challenges at the beginning, but it's, I think every time when you immigrate to a country, it's to make contact and to have your network, to get new network. Even if you're going to some meetup or through a group, etc., it can be difficult, especially the first year, to make a connection that will be relevant for you. And you want to make friends, but you want also to make connection for work. And at the beginning, coming from Europe, where at this time it wasn't so developed networking and the importance of networking, it was difficult at the beginning, but along the way, I think it was a good lesson learned, you know, and yet me to not be scared, to make connection and try to get contact, etc. It was one. And definitely immigration, I totally agree, because I have to leave to US because my company was merged with another company, and the US had to tell me, oh, due to this merge, we don't have the same agreement with this country as France. You have to leave now, and you have 30 days to leave the country. And it can be very scary, and that's why for anyone who immigrate in US, all the time think about a backup, because it happened to me, it happened to some other friend. I think it's possible to stay in US, but think about some backup.
Yeah.
And coming from Europe, of course, health insurance and the cost of health, it's incredible.
I found it's more and more difficult now to come to the US just with a backpack and decide, oh, I'm just gonna stay here. It's almost impossible. You need to have a plan. We'll all agree that plan is absolutely necessary, having a backup, a plan A, B, or C, having some money aside, and how to develop connection and meaningful Pascal connection that are authentic but also sustainable. For Michael, because you have American friends from all over, but also French friends, how do you connect with Americans and French? Do you see a cultural differences in how they network, how you approach them?
Yeah, no, I think in our globalized world, people are increasingly becoming not, I guess, similar in terms of similar set of expectations in the working world. I think there are varying levels of culture. So, you know, whether it's international, regional, domestic, or corporate culture. So, for example, I work in advertising and marketing, and there's a lot of similarities. If you step in an ad agency in Paris or Chicago. Obviously there's differences, but similar structures, similar look and feel, similar work environment, kind of more casual and creative. And so there are cultures, very stark cultural differences between France and the US for sure, which I'll address in one second. But personally, in my industry of advertising, I see a lot of similarities. So that actually harks to just kind of a similar industry. I'm sure Pascal has seen some similarities in Quebec and the US and France between, Fintech and different firms like that. But in my own personal experience, I think, like, for example, France places a lot more importance on kind of a work-life balance. Vacation is not taboo, even though in the US, it depends on the company you're at. 2 to 3 weeks vacation in a non-educational industry, like if you're working in finance or marketing or law, 2 to 3 weeks vacation is the norm. And you can accumulate more with seniority within a company. But this fast-paced work heavy, go get 'em culture, which a lot more competition, I think, in the work world. And it almost makes it that vacation is kind of like a taboo. If you take like 2 weeks, consecutive weeks of vacation in the US, and you don't have that much time off, like as a teacher, for example, or in another area of work, you almost have a guilty feeling of taking 2 weeks of vacation because you just feel like people are judging you negatively. That's in my experience, where France really trying to treasures vacation. Everyone loves vacation. Let's be honest, that's human. But in the US, I think work-life balance is less prioritized. I do think companies here are catching up with more robust maternity and paternity leave policies. And with more innovative companies like Google and Facebook, they tend to want to attract a lot of good talent. And so they're looking to Europe for examples for better work-life balance. But another, I guess, going back to a difference between the US and France is you can find a lot of stability there in terms of, like, I believe a fifth of the workforce are government employees, fonctionnaires. And just like in the US, there's a certain level of stability with a guaranteed pension, with job stability and job security. It's much harder to be fired. And I think a lot of people look for that stability, where they're more comfortable in that environment. And I think that contributes to bureaucracy, obviously, in the France and US. And when it comes to jumping through administrative hoops to get your papers settled, I've, because of you guys and other friends who have lived in the US from different countries, I've learned about, the difficulties you do face from an administrative point of view. And to your points of having a robust plan in place with, maybe options A, B, C, D, E, you really need to plan it out to be able to anticipate needs and also anticipate inconsistencies and stuff you hear from government officials. For example, in France, I might have seen a list of documents to provide in order to have my work visa renewed. But I'd always have to be ready with something in my back pocket. Even if it weren't on the list, I would bring extra copies of documents. So I think that in terms of similarities, you have to jump through hoops no matter which country you're going to. But France does have less of a financial burden going there as an expat. Public systems of education and health are a lot less burdensome. The paperwork and the waiting times to get your carte vitale and your social security there can be pretty long and lengthy. But overall, it's not as capital intensive to live there as an expat. Obviously, cost of living is high in Paris and salaries are lower in France than in the US. But to your point, healthcare, really good private education in the US is expensive. But if you live in a neighborhood that is well-to-do in the US, your public schools are going to be great because it's funded by the taxes. So it depends on where you live. But in general, I think living in France takes a lot of patience because it's less of a culture of convenience, I think. You can go to the store in the US pretty much at any time you want, except for this COVID time. 24-hour supermarkets and 24-hour stores are more common in the US. So there's little discrepancies in everyday life. And what I learned in France the most is just to have patience and to not expect that it's going to be like your life in the US. As evident as that sounds, it's surprising to hear a lot of Americans who go to France and are frustrated because it's not the way that they think it should be. So I think the overall advice I have, whether you're going to be moving to the US as an expat or moving to France as an expat, is to leave your expectations at the door and just be prepared as much as possible, but to practice a lot of patience and listening.
Thank you, Michael. You talked about the work-life balance, and hopefully during that challenging confinement time, employers have revised their policy about working from home and being more progressive about allowing employees to work remote. I think that we are going to see a change, Pascal, because you are in the tech industry, that we can see employees who are successful working from home. So hopefully it's going to lead the way to a more progressive approach of work-life balance. Something also I want to discuss is obviously words of wisdom and inspiration. We know that the difficulties are there, whatever country you decide to immigrate. Camille, if you had words of advice, of inspirational message to somebody who would like to immigrate tomorrow to Chicago, what would you tell that person?
I will tell them that it may sound cheesy, but never give up. You never know what can, things can turn around, and as long as you believe or just, as long as you want to and you're ready to work hard for it. One thing that I really love about the US is that people here are ready to give you a chance. If you show your motivation and you show that you're ready to work hard towards your goal, people are like, fine, you convinced me, just go for it. So just self-confidence, just believe in yourself, and there's always a way. I feel like somewhere you can make it. And yeah, just be open. Don't compare all the time France and the US. Of course you will do that all the time at the beginning, but I hope that's not why people are here or come here for. So just be open and experience and get ready to be homesick and just feel lost a little, but it's all part of it. It's just an amazing adventure and an amazing chance, if I can say, to be able to live in the US. I feel very lucky, and yeah, just never give up, just try, and don't be scared to connect with people. I feel like for French people, it's very hard, like Pascal was saying, like to network and just make a first step towards someone you don't know. Here, people are so used to that. So just reach out, talk to people. I feel like the American people are very welcoming overall, and always ready to help because they love their own country, and they will most likely be happy to have you here to experience it, and then have you being proud of the country as well. So just come and experience and enjoy it, and yeah, it will always be positive if you are positive yourself.
It's all about mindset. I like that message of hope, of connection, of being very also be prepared for some mistakes and possibly some failure, because we all went through that. Pascal, based on your experiences now living in Canada, how would you compare both countries, and would you still encourage people to move to the US?
I think it's interesting for a lot of people want to move to US because they want to live the American dream. And I had a friend who wanted to live the American dream, but he was never able to have a job in US because he didn't have the visa. And at some point I told him a couple of years ago, before I moved to US, I said, maybe you should have a look to Canada. And finally, he moved to Canada, he lived in Canada and now he's Canadian. And he was able to live his dream, you know, what he imagined about the American dream, because Canada and US, even if they are different, there is a lot of similitude. Like the two are huge countries, have a lot of nature. From Canada, from Montreal, and most of the biggest Canadian cities are very close to the US border. Mm. And I think in general, it's not, if you have a dream, you should be able to achieve it. It doesn't, you need to be patient, but it doesn't mean that you will achieve it in the next 6 months, but you have a way. If really it's your dream, you have a way. Maybe you can work for someone in France that may have an office in US and be transferred at some point in US, or maybe you can, if you are just, you can do a year of a study abroad. Also, you can, if you work for, well, just graduate from university and you want to have your first experience, you can use VIE, Volontaire International Entreprise. It's what I did when I was in Romania and transferred it in US. There is a way to do it, and I think it's still possible, even if immigration look complicated. There is still a way to do it, and some visas that are easier to get than others.
Yeah, you mentioned all the different options, all the different possibilities. We need to be very creative and resourceful when we come to the US. What brought me to the US is study. So I came here to study. Eventually, I stayed too. Michael, thank you so much for your double experience. It's very refreshing, but also fascinating to have your experience having worked in France, but also worked in the US and being so francophone, francophile. I mean, that's amazing. Thank you, France, so much for your unique experiences and your stories. That's what makes this YouTube channel so successful, is I'm learning all kinds of different things myself. We're sharing the knowledge because knowledge is power. Thank you so much for your participation this week. I will see you next week for a new episode of Yapa Photo. Thank you, friends. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Merci. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.